The UNSV Nightingale moved slowly through space, its white hull gleaming against the darkness. Red crosses marked its sides, visible from all angles. It was the pride of Earth's humanitarian fleet, a hospital ship built to help those who needed it most. Captain Olivia Barnes stood on the bridge, her blue uniform neat and pressed. She watched as the ship approached Rigel IV, a planet torn by war. 15 years of service had prepared her for missions like this. She was calm, even as reports of fighting on the planet's surface reached her ears. "Captain, we're receiving distress signals from 3 different settlements," said Communications Officer Peter Miller. His young face showed concern as he adjusted his headset. "Acknowledge them all," Olivia replied. "Tell them the Nightingale is here to help everyone, regardless of side." The hospital ship carried 1,500 people. Most were doctors, nurses, and medical staff. Some were patients already receiving care. None were soldiers. The Nightingale had no weapons, just medicine, surgical equipment, and hope. Dr. Christopher Allen walked through the medical bay, checking supplies. His hands, skilled from years of surgery, moved quickly as he organized tools. A scar ran across his left cheek, a reminder of his time serving in an earlier conflict. "Chris, are we ready for the first wave?" asked Chief Medical Officer Susan Wright. She was older than most of the staff, with gray streaks in her dark hair. Her specialty was not just medicine, but understanding the customs of different species. This skill had saved many lives over the years. "We're ready," Chris said. "All operating rooms prepped. Burn unit standing by. We've handled worse." Susan nodded but looked worried. "This conflict is different. The Karvaks don't follow the same rules of war we do." Chris shrugged. "Good thing we're not here to fight them, then." Throughout the ship, medical teams prepared for their work. They checked equipment, studied the latest reports on blast injuries, and reviewed alien physiologies. Many had worked together for years. They moved with the efficiency of people who trusted each other completely. In the ship's mess hall, Nurse Ben Howard led a short prayer for safety. Not everyone joined, but they all respected the moment of quiet. The Nightingale's crew came from many beliefs and backgrounds, but they shared one mission: to heal. On the bridge, Olivia received a message from Earth Command. She read it quickly and turned to her second-in-command, Eric Foster. "Command says Karvak ships have been spotted in this sector. We're to proceed with caution." Eric frowned. "Should we wait for an escort?" Olivia looked at the planet on the view screen. Smoke rose from several cities. "There are people dying down there, Eric. We don't have time to wait." The ship continued its approach. Its powerful engines, designed for stability rather than speed, pushed it steadily forward. Inside the hull, doctors explained procedures to nurses. Technicians calibrated advanced medical equipment. Beds were prepared for the wounded. In her private quarters, Olivia recorded her daily log. "Ship's log, Captain Barnes. The Nightingale has reached Rigel IV to provide medical assistance to all affected by the conflict. We've been warned of Karvak presence, but will maintain our humanitarian mission, as required by Galactic Concordat regulations. All medical bays are prepared for casualties." She paused, looking at a photo on her desk. It showed her with her family back on Earth. "We expect to begin receiving patients within 6 hours. The crew understands the risks of operating in a conflict zone, but we're all committed to our duty. The Nightingale was built to bring help to those who need it most. That's exactly what we intend to do." As the ship entered orbit, no one on board knew they were being watched. 3 Karvak warships waited on the far side of the planet, their commanders discussing the human vessel that had just arrived. Their conversation was not about humanitarian aid or medical assistance. It was about opportunities. The Nightingale completed its first orbit of Rigel IV. Captain Olivia Barnes reviewed the landing sites chosen for medical teams. 3 areas needed help most: a mining colony in the north, a refugee camp near the equator, and a mixed-species settlement on the southern continent. "We'll send teams to all 3, she told her officers. Dr. Wright will lead the northern team. Dr. Allen, You take the refugee camp. I want our best people on the ground." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Through the large view screen, Rigel IE's blue-green surface spun slowly. No one noticed the slight shimmer as 3 Karvak warships disabled their cloaking devices behind them. The first blast hit without warning. The ship rocked violently. Alarms screamed throughout the Nightingale. Crew members fell to the floor as the lights flickered. "Report," Olivia shouted, pulling herself back to her feet. "Direct hit to our port side," Eric said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Sections 12 through 17 damage. Shields at 40%. Peter Miller's hands flew across his communications panel. "Captain, 3 Karvak warships have decloaked behind us. They're charging weapons again." Olivia hit the ship-wide comm. "All hands, brace for impact. Medical teams, secure your patients." The second blast tore through the Nightingale's thin hull. The hospital ship had only basic shields, not the heavy armor of military vessels. It wasn't built for battle. "Broadcast our status on all frequencies," Olivia ordered. "Make it clear we're a medical vessel protected under Galactic Concordat Article 7. Peter nodded, his face pale. "Broadcasting now, Captain. I'm also sending out a distress call to any Earth ships in range." In the medical bay, chaos erupted. Ceiling panels fell as the ship shuddered. Dr. Allen worked to protect patients already under care. He helped a nurse pull an elderly alien from a bed as a support beam crashed down where the patient had been seconds before. "Move everyone to the intersections," he shouted over the alarms. "Use the escape pods if you have to." The third blast was the worst. The Nightingale listed to one side as its stabilizers failed. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red. Smoke poured from damaged systems. On the bridge, Olivia received the damage reports with growing horror. Engine room hit. Life support failing in sections 20 through 35. Hull breach on decks 3, 4, and 7. "They're targeting our critical systems," Eric said. "This is deliberate." Olivia's face hardened. "Peter, open a direct channel to Earth Command." As Peter worked, the ship rocked again. A console exploded, sending sparks across the bridge. An officer screamed as burns covered his face. "Channel open, Captain," Peter said, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Olivia stood straight despite the tilting floor. "This is Captain Olivia Barnes of the UNSV Nightingale. We are under attack by Karvak forces. We have no weapons. We have made our status as a medical vessel clear." They continue to fire. She paused as another blast hit. "I am ordering emergency evacuation. Most pods will not make it. For those who find this recording, we came to heal. Remember why we died." Throughout the ship, crew members helped patients and each other to escape pods. Many refused to leave their patients. Dr. Wright stayed with 3 critical cases who couldn't be moved. Dr. Allen forced his medical team into the last pod in their section before sealing them in and turning back to help others. The Karvak ships continued firing methodically, targeting engines, communication arrays, and escape pod launches. Their weapons were precise, designed to ensure maximum damage. In her final moments on the bridge, Captain Barnes watched as the Nightingale began to break apart. The view screen showed Rigel IV below, still peaceful from this distance. She thought of the people they had come to help. "Transmit the ship's logs and all medical records to Earth," she told Peter quietly. "They should know exactly what happened here." The bridge erupted in flames as the Karvak flagship fired one last shot at the dying hospital ship. Admiral John Carver watched the recording for the 5th time. Each viewing made his stomach tighten more. On the large screen in the Pentagon War Room, Captain Barnes' final message played out again, her calm voice describing the unprovoked attack. The chaos around her as her ship died. Her final words, "We came to heal. Remember why we died." John turned to face the 20 officers and government officials who sat in stunned silence. No one spoke for several moments after the recording ended. "That's all we have?" asked Secretary of Defense Richard Gomes. John nodded. "Yes, sir. The Nightingale's final transmission. We've recovered 42 survivors so far from escape pods. The Carvex shot down most of the others. On the other side of the solar system, Earth's UN headquarters buzzed with activity. Lieutenant Commander Amy Powell walked quickly through the halls of the Galactic Council chamber. She carried a data drive containing all the evidence of the attack: ship logs, medical records, distress calls, and the final transmission. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands shook slightly. "The council is ready," said her assistant. Amy paused before entering. "Are the Carvac representatives here?" "Yes, Mom. They're claiming it was a mistake, that they thought the Nightingale was carrying weapons." Amy's expression hardened. "They fired on clearly marked medical personnel for 27 minutes. That wasn't a mistake." Inside the chamber, representatives from 36 species waited. Some showed shock, others calculation. The Carvac delegate, a tall figure with gray skin and 4 eyes, stood apart from the others. Amy presented the evidence methodically. The Nightingale's open manifest policy that allowed any species to verify its cargo. The clear medical markings on the hull. The repeated broadcasts identifying it as a hospital ship. The targeted nature of the Carvac attack, specifically aiming for escape pods. When she played Captain Barnes' final message, many representatives lowered their eyes or their equivalent organs of sight. The Carvac delegate shifted uncomfortably. "The United Earth government demands justice for this clear violation of Galactic Concord at Article 7, Amy concluded. This was not an act of war. It was a massacre of medical personnel protected under interstellar law. Across Earth, people watched news of the attack. In parks and public spaces, holographic memorials displayed the faces and names of the Nightingale's crew. People left flowers, candles, and medical insignia as tributes. In Chicago, Ben Howard's family gathered around their kitchen table. His mother held his picture from medical school graduation. His sister, a nurse herself, stared blankly at the wall. "He always wanted to help people," his father said quietly, "even as a little boy." In orbit around Mars, Dr. Elizabeth Grant floated in a recovery pod. One of the few survivors, she had third-degree burns over 30% of her body. Through her pain medication, she watched Earth news reports about the attack. A nurse entered to check her vitals. "You should rest," he told her. "They need to know what happened," Elizabeth whispered. "I need to tell them." In his private office, President Laura Mitchell reviewed military options with her closest advisors. Reports from intelligence agencies across the solar system showed increased Carvac activity near human colonies. "They're testing us," said her chief of staff, "seeing how we'll respond." Laura stared at the casualty list from the Nightingale. 1,458 dead. Most had been doctors, nurses, and aid workers. "For 30 years, we've built hospitals instead of warships," she said. "We've sent aid workers instead of soldiers. We extended our hand in peace." She placed her hand flat on the table. "Get me Admiral Carver. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when humanity's mercy dies." In shipyards hidden throughout the solar system, lights began to come on in long-dormant facilities. Construction drones activated. Engineers who had spent their careers maintaining outdated defense systems received new orders. The Earth wasn't preparing to defend itself. It was preparing to strike back. The shipyards around Saturn had been quiet for decades. Now they hummed with activity. Massive construction lights illuminated the darkness. Workers in spacesuits moved across the hulls of ships that had been half-built and then abandoned when Earth chose peace over war. Admiral John Carver stood at the viewing window of Saturn Command. Below him, the UNSV Retribution was nearly complete. It was Earth's first true warship in 30 years. Its sleek hull was painted dark gray, a sharp contrast to the white medical ships that had been Earth's ambassadors to the stars. "She'll be ready in 3 days," said General Frank Rogers, the head of the shipyard. "The weapons systems are already online." John nodded. "And the others?" 15 ships ready now. 28 more within 2 weeks. We've reactivated every reserve vessel we have." 30 years of peace had not meant 30 years of weakness. Earth had maintained its defenses, keeping ships and weapons in reserve while hoping never to use them. That hope was now gone. In his apartment in Seattle, Commander Daniel Kelly packed a small bag. His military uniform, unworn for 5 years, hung on his closet door. His fingers traced the commander's stripes as memories flooded back. He had left the service believing humanity had moved beyond war. Now his reactivation orders proved him wrong. His wife Lisa watched from the doorway. "You don't have to go," she said softly. Daniel turned to her. 15 doctors from this city died on the Nightingale. People I knew, people who just wanted to help. He put on his uniform, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar after so long. If we do nothing, it will happen again. Across Earth and its colonies, similar scenes played out. Reserve officers received orders. Retired engineers returned to shipyards. Medical personnel trained for combat situations. The public mood shifted from shock to determination. News feeds showed images of the Nightingale's destruction alongside profiles of its crew. The message was clear. This was not revenge. This was justice. President Laura Mitchell addressed the United Earth Congress. Behind her stood the families of some who had died aboard the hospital ship. "For 3 decades, we have led by example," she said. "We have shown that humanity's greatest strength is not our ability to wage war, but our commitment to peace. We built hospital ships instead of warships. We sent doctors instead of soldiers." She paused, looking at the faces of those who had lost loved ones. The Karvak hegemony mistook our restraint for weakness. They believed we would not respond when they murdered our healers. They were wrong. The Congress erupted in applause, an unusual break in the normally formal setting. In orbit around Jupiter, the First Fleet gathered. 12 ships, their crews a mix of veterans and newly reactivated personnel. Admiral Carver addressed them from the bridge of the Retribution. Humanity extended its hand in peace, and that hand was severed, he said, his voice transmitted to every ship. "We will not seek vengeance. We will deliver justice." Daniel Kelly reported to the Retribution as its tactical officer. He walked through corridors filled with crew members preparing for departure. Some looked nervous, others determined. None looked eager for war. That, Daniel thought, was a good sign. Admiral Carver met him on the bridge. "Commander Kelly, welcome back." Daniel saluted. "I wish it were under different circumstances, sir." "As do we all." John handed him a tablet with mission details. "The Karvaks have bases in 3 systems. We believe they're planning strikes against our colonies." Daniel studied the information. His tactical mind, once his greatest asset in the service, quickly assessed strengths and weaknesses. "They don't expect us to strike first," he said. "No," John agreed. "They think we'll issue protests, impose sanctions, maybe build up our defenses, but nothing more." His face hardened. "They believe we lack the will to fight." Daniel looked up at the view screen showing Earth, peaceful and blue. "That's always been humanity's deadliest mistake," he said quietly. "Thinking we won't fight." The Retribution's engines powered up. Earth was going to war. The Earth fleet moved silently through the darkness of space. 6 warships approached Proxima Centauri, their engines running quiet. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Carver and Commander Kelly studied the tactical display. "The Karvak base is here," Daniel said, pointing to a small moon orbiting the system's 4th planet. "Intelligence says it's their main communication hub for this sector." John nodded. "And their defenses. 2 patrol ships, surface-to-space weapons, about 300 personnel. They had been traveling for 2 weeks since leaving Earth. This would be humanity's first military strike against another species in 30 years. "We're not here to kill," John reminded everyone on the bridge. "We need their communications data. That gives us their attack plans, their fleet positions." Daniel looked at his team. Young faces, mostly. They had trained for defense, not attack. "Strike Team Bravo is ready, sir. We go in fast, get the data, disable their systems, and leave." The Admiral placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Good hunting, Commander." Daniel led 12 soldiers on the mission. They wore Earth's new combat armor, lightweight but strong, with built-in systems to monitor vital signs. Their shuttle approached the Karvak base from the dark side of the moon. "Remember," Daniel told his team, "stun weapons only. We're not them." The Karvak didn't expect an attack. Their security was focused outward, watching for large ships, not a small shuttle coming from the surface. Daniel's team landed without detection. Lisa Martinez, the team's tech specialist, bypassed the first set of alarms. "We've got 20 minutes before the security system resets," she whispered. They moved through gray corridors lit by dim blue lights. 2 Karvak guards appeared around a corner. Daniel fired his stun weapon before they could raise an alarm. The guards collapsed without a sound. "Drag them into that side room," he ordered. "No permanent harm." The communications center was their target. Through its doors, Daniel could see 5 Karvak technicians working at stations. He signaled his team to surround the entrance. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. They burst into the room. The Karvak technicians reached for weapons but were too slow. Stun blasts dropped them to the floor. "Lisa, get to work. Everyone else, defensive positions." Lisa plugged her equipment into the Karvak systems. Data began to flow. Star charts, fleet positions, communication codes, everything Earth needed to anticipate the next Karvak moves. "We've got company," said Sergeant Owen Wright from his position at the door. "At least 20 guards heading this way." Daniel checked his weapon. "How long, Lisa?" 3 more minutes." The first shots hit the wall outside the communications center. The Karvak were using plasma weapons, designed to kill, not stun. "Return fire," Daniel ordered. "Keep them back." The team fired carefully, aiming to disable, not destroy. When a Karvak fell, they fired at the next. None of the Earth soldiers aimed for vital areas. "Got it," Lisa finally shouted. She disconnected her equipment. All data secured. Daniel reached for his communicator. "Retribution, this is Strike Team Bravo. Package secured. Requesting extraction." "Copy that. Bravo. Extraction team inbound." They retreated step by step, holding the Karvak forces back. No one on either side had died yet. Daniel wanted to keep it that way. In space above, the Earth fleet engaged the 2 Karvak patrol ships. The Retribution fired precisely, disabling engines and weapons systems without destroying the vessels. When all Earth personnel were safely aboard their ships, Admiral Carver gave the order to withdraw. The fleet jumped away, leaving behind confused but living Karvak soldiers. Back on the Retribution, Daniel delivered the stolen data to Admiral Carver. "This shows their planned attack routes," John said as he studied the information. "They're targeting 3 Earth colonies next. And now we'll be waiting for them," Daniel replied. At the Galactic Council, Dr. Elizabeth Grant stood before the representatives. She still wore her medical uniform, its white fabric stained with scorch marks from the Nightingale attack. Her burns had barely healed. "I was there," she told them, her voice quiet but firm. "I watched as they targeted our medical base, as they fired on escape pods carrying patients." The council chamber was silent. "Earth does not want war," she continued. "We want justice." As she spoke, news of the Proxima Centauri mission reached the council. Earth had struck its first blow, with restraint, with precision, and without a single casualty. 3 months passed since the first Earth strike. The war spread across 5 star systems. The Karvak hegemony, once confident in their military strength, now faced an enemy unlike any they had fought before. Chief Engineer Nicole Howard stood in her workshop on the Retribution. Parts and tools covered every surface. She hadn't slept in 30 hours, but excitement kept her awake. On her main workbench sat a small device that might change the course of the war. "Admiral on deck," someone called. Nicole straightened as Admiral Carver entered. "Sir, It's ready for testing. John looked at the device. It seemed too small to be important. This can detect their cloaked ships. Yes, sir. The Karvak cloaking technology bends light around their vessels, but it creates tiny distortions in space. My device can find these distortions. John picked up the device. Earth scientists had been working on this problem for years, even during peacetime. Nickel had finally solved it. Get it installed on all our ships immediately, he ordered. At Tau Ceti, the third battle group of the Karvak fleet prepared to attack an Earth colony. 8 warships, all with advanced weapons and cloaking devices. Their commanders felt confident. They had superior numbers, the element of surprise. They didn't know that Earth ships waited for them. The Retribution led a force of 5 Earth vessels. They hid behind a large asteroid field. Nickel's detection devices were active on all ships. Contact, reported the sensor officer. 8 Karvak warships approaching. 7 are cloaked. Daniel Kelly studied the tactical display. They think we don't know they're coming. Admiral Carver nodded. Let's prove them wrong. All ships, battle positions. The Earth fleet moved with precision. Each ship knew its role. They had practiced this maneuver dozens of times. When the Karvak ships emerged from light speed, the Earth fleet was already firing. Nickel's device gave their weapons perfect targeting data. The first 2 Karvak ships lost their engines before they could react. Target their weapons systems and propulsion only, John ordered. This had become Earth's standard approach. Disable, don't destroy. The Karvak commanders, confused by Earth's ability to see their cloaked vessels, responded with full attacks. They fired to kill. Earth ships took damage but continued the precisely planned assault. One by one, the Karvak warships lost power, weapons, or engines. None were destroyed. None of their crews died. After 40 minutes, the entire Karvak third battle group floated helpless in space. Earth Marines boarded the disabled ships. They took prisoners but treated them with care. The Karvak officers were brought to the Retribution. In a plane room, Lieutenant Paul Martinez questioned a Karvak commander named Vexkar. Why did you attack a hospital ship? Paul asked. Vexkar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. It was a military vessel disguised as a medical ship. You know that's not true. The Karvak shifted uncomfortably. Our leaders said humans were weak. That after the hospital ship, you would fear us. That you had forgotten how to fight. Paul leaned forward. We didn't forget. We chose not to. News of the victory at Tau Ceti spread quickly. Earth hadn't lost a single ship. The Karvak had lost 8, not destroyed, but captured. It was a turning point. On Earth, President Mitchell addressed the people. Today we have shown that humanity can defend itself without becoming what we fight against. Our forces disabled the entire Karvak battle group without taking a single enemy life. In cities across the planet, people gathered to watch the speech. They cheered not for death and destruction, but for a victory without massacre. On the Retribution, Admiral Carver studied reports from other fronts. Karvak forces were retreating in 3 sectors. Their leadership, so certain of easy victory, now faced a united human force that fought with precision and restraint. They thought we were soft, he told Daniel, because we built hospital ships. Daniel nodded. They didn't understand. Choosing peace doesn't mean you can't fight. It means you know exactly why you should. The tide of war had turned. Earth was winning. And it was winning without becoming the monster it fought. Captain Steve Donovan checked his equipment one final time. His small ship, the Scout, had been disguised to look like a Karvak supply vessel. It would take them deep into enemy territory, to the heart of the Karvak hegemony. Everyone ready? He asked his team of 6. They nodded, faces serious beneath the dim red lights of the cockpit. Lieutenant Karen Williams sat at the communications station. She was the team's expert on Karvak language and culture. I studied their transmissions for months, she said. I can get us past their security checks. The mission was the most dangerous yet attempted by Earth forces. They would enter Karvak space, land on Vorlak, the Karvik military headquarters, and find proof of who had ordered the Nightingale attack. Admiral Carver was clear. Steve reminded them, "This is about intelligence, not revenge. We get in, find the evidence, and get out." The scout entered Karvak space without incident. Karen's perfect imitation of Karvak communication protocols got them through 3 checkpoints. No one suspected the small supply ship was crewed by humans. They landed at a busy spaceport on Vorlak. The planet's orange sky and thin atmosphere required them to wear breathing masks, which helped hide their human features. Dressed in Karvak worker uniforms, they moved toward the Central Military Command building. "The security building is ahead," Karen whispered. "According to our intelligence, the records we need are in the central database." Steve nodded. "Jason, Maria, watch our exit. The rest of you with me." They entered the building using passes Karen had created. Inside, the architecture was strange to human eyes. Angles that seemed wrong, ceilings too high, doorways too narrow. The halls were filled with Karvik military personnel. Karen led them to a maintenance tunnel. "This should take us to the central server room." They crawled through narrow spaces for 20 minutes. Steve checked the map on his wrist device. Almost there. The server room was guarded by 2 Karvak soldiers. Steve and his team waited until a shift change, then moved quickly. Stun weapons dropped the new guards before they could sound an alarm. "We have 10 minutes before they're missed," Steve said. Karen connected her device to the main computer. She typed rapidly, searching through files, looking for communications from before the Nightingale attack. The others kept watch. Steve felt sweat running down his back despite the cool air. "I found it," Karen said suddenly. Her voice was tight. "Operation Mercy Test. It was planned months before the attack." Steve looked over her shoulder at the Karvak text. "What does it say?" "It was a test to see how Earth would respond to an attack on a non-military target. They specifically chose a hospital ship to see if we would," her voice faltered, "to see if we had the will to fight back." Steve's jaw tightened. "Who authorized it?" Karen scrolled through more files. "High Commander Dexvan. He's here, in this building right now." Steve thought of the Nightingale, of Captain Barnes' final words, of the doctors and nurses who died trying to help others. Part of him wanted to find this Dexvan and deliver justice personally. But that wasn't the mission. "Download everything," he ordered. "We need to get this back to Earth." An alarm suddenly blared through the building. Red lights flashed in the corridor. "They've found the guards," said Sergeant Greg Phillips, watching the door. Steve made a quick decision. New plan. "Karen, finish the download. Everyone else, prepare for extraction. We fight our way out if necessary." Karen worked frantically as the others prepared for battle. Security doors began closing throughout the building. "Done," she finally said, disconnecting her device. Steve led them into the corridor. They could hear Karvak security forces approaching from both directions. "This way," he said, heading for a maintenance shaft they had identified in their planning. As they ran, Steve thought about Dexvan, the Karvik commander responsible for the Nightingale's destruction. He was somewhere in this building. Steve could try to find him, to make him pay personally for what he had done. But that would risk his team. It would risk the mission. It would make him no better than those who had attacked a hospital ship. "Keep moving," he told his people. "The evidence is what matters now." They escaped through service tunnels, fighting their way past security checkpoints. When they finally reached their ship, 3 of them had minor injuries, but all were alive. As the scout lifted off, Karvak fighters pursued them. But the small Earth ship was faster than it looked. They jumped to light speed before the Karvak could shoot them down. Steve looked at the data device containing proof of the Karvak's cold calculation. "We got what we came for," he said quietly. "Now Earth will know the truth." 1 year had passed since the destruction of the Nightingale. The war that followed had changed both Earth and the Karvak hegemony forever. Admiral John Carver stood before the Galactic Council. Behind him, the view screen showed images of Karvak military bases, now under Earth control. Not destroyed, but disabled. In 1 year, Earth forces had systematically dismantled the Karvak war machine without causing a single civilian casualty. The evidence retrieved from Vorlak proves that the attack on our hospital ship was planned, John told the council. It was called Operation Mercy Test, designed to see if Earth would fight back. Representatives from 36 species listened in silence. Even the Karvak delegate could not deny the proof. Earth now controls all major Karvak military installations, John continued. We could destroy their civilization if we wished. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. But that is not our way. He outlined Earth's terms for peace. Trials for those who planned the Nightingale attack, reparations for the victims' families, and demilitarized zones between Earth and Karvak territories. We did not want this war, he concluded. We will not extend it unnecessarily. On the Karvak homeworld, internal rebellion had spread. Ordinary Karvak citizens, learning the truth about their leadership's actions, had risen against them. The economy had collapsed under Earth's precise military strikes. The hegemony had no choice but to accept Earth's terms. High Commander Dexpan and 5 other Karvak leaders stood trial for war crimes. The evidence from Captain Donovan's mission left no doubt of their guilt. They were sentenced to work in hospitals throughout the galaxy under constant supervision. Their punishment would be to heal, not to suffer. At Earth's main shipyard, a new vessel prepared for its maiden voyage. The UNSV Forgiveness gleamed white against the darkness of space. Like the Nightingale, it was a hospital ship, but this one carried both human and Karvak medical staff. Dr. Christopher Allen, one of the few survivors of the Nightingale, stood on the bridge as chief medical officer. The memories of the attack still haunted him, but he had chosen to move forward. "Are you ready, Doctor?" asked Commander Daniel Kelly, who had requested reassignment from the Retribution to serve as military liaison to the new hospital ship. Chris nodded. "It won't be easy working alongside Karvak doctors. But if we don't start somewhere, the cycle never ends." On Earth, a memorial service marked the 1-year anniversary of the attack. President Laura Mitchell spoke at a monument bearing the names of all who died aboard the Nightingale. At the center of the memorial, Captain Barnes' final words were inscribed. "We came to heal. Remember why we died." Among those attending was Dr. Elizabeth Grant, her burn scars still visible but faded. Next to her stood a young Karvak medical student, one of many who had publicly denounced their leader's actions. "My people must learn from your people's response," the student told Elizabeth. "You could have destroyed us. Instead, you showed restraint." Elizabeth touched her scars. "Revenge is easy," she said. "Peace is harder. That's why it's worth fighting for." Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Carver received notification that the peace treaty had been signed. Throughout the ship, crew members who had fought for a year without taking a life celebrated quietly. They had won a war without becoming what they'd fought against. As the Forgiveness prepared to depart on its first mission, Commander Kelly stood on the observation deck. Below him, Earth shone blue and peaceful. He thought of all that had happened since the day the Nightingale was destroyed. Admiral Carver joined him. "Having second thoughts about your transfer request?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sir. The war is over. It's time to heal." John nodded, looking at the new hospital ship. "We remembered why they died," he said, quoting Captain Barnes' final words. Daniel finished the thought. "Now we need to remember how to live." The Forgiveness moved away from Earth, carrying doctors instead of soldiers, medicine instead of weapons. As it accelerated toward its first mission, its white hull reflected the sun's light, a beacon of hope in the darkness of space, exactly as the Nightingale had been. The cycle of violence had been broken. A new peace had begun.